So today I'm protesting as Sonic Furries for Trump directly in front of my local Democratic Party office. And this is an excellent example of what freedom of speech is in America. Even if it's a very unpopular idea and something that's very silly, I am free to come out here in public, in a public space, and express it any way that I see fit. Sonic Furries for Trump! Trump 2020! Sonic fans unite! If you're a Sonic Furry, Trump supports your freedom! Are you a Sonic Furry?
Can I get a picture with you?
Absolutely. Sonic Furries for Trump 2020.
Henry.
We gotta make America fast again.
Hey guys, Drifter here. Don't worry, it wasn't just clickbait. We're gonna have a lot more Sonic in today's video. We also have PC gameplay from a whole variety of PC games, so I hope you enjoy that today because I want to talk about America's First Amendment rights of freedom of speech and more specifically how that applies on the internet. The video was definitely inspired by Steven Crowder's demonetization, banning the Vox Adpocalypse, how Google and Twitter have deplatformed Alex Jones and other people, and generally about conservative censorship on media platforms. We are today not going to be going down the conspiracy end of things. We're going to be taking a very serious look at what freedom of speech is in the United States and how that applies specifically to the internet, because internet freedom of speech is not the same as freedom of speech in person. Freedom of speech in the United States is a constitutional right that is guaranteed by the first and most important amendment to our Constitution. You've probably heard this in your high school civics class, but it says, "Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion, prohibiting free speech thereof, or abridging the freedom of speech, or of the press, or of the people to peaceably assemble, and to petition the government for redress of grievances." That's pretty much the whole thing, but there's a lot of other judgments and accessory laws that go with how this is applied. The Free Speech Amendment in the United States was passed for three main reasons. Number one, freedom of speech and religion are a singular package in the United States, and it was done to keep all of the different Christian denominations from killing each other and to moderately legalize atheism, because some of the founders were, well, they had interesting views, but our nation was a hodgepodge of different Christian denominations and maybe a very small amount of foreign religions, and in order to keep our United States united, we didn't need them all killing each other. Now, currently it's more broadly applied to all religions, but originally it was meant for Christianity. Number two is to legalize a philosophical ideal of democracy, going all the way back to Plato's Republic, which is that free communication makes a society better, and most democracies in, well, the entire world enjoy some version of this right. The idea to freely communicate a political thought or social thought or an expression of self or pretty much any sort of communication should be free, because we believe that in a marketplace of ideas that the best ideas win out, and that even some of the crazier, more unpopular ideas might actually be good, so suppressing them can be bad for society. And finally, it was passed to avoid government tyranny, because we just fought a war against a monarchy and an oppressive government regime, and we never wanted to see that again, so we passed this law. The United States has one of the strongest free expression laws in the world, and it's viewed as being almost completely unrestricted. Uniquely, laws in the United States were written with the freedom to offend or the intention of causing offense. This includes the right to offend, insult, and say hurtful things about other people or groups. Uniquely, U.S. laws are written with the freedom to offend others in mind instead of freedom from offense. Now, typically in Europe and some other liberal democracies, you have freedom from hurtful speech, freedom from discrimination. In the United States, you have freedom to offend, freedom to discriminate, and basically freedom to do almost whatever you want. That's why, for example, Canada and the United Kingdom can have criminal punishments for calling people racial slurs, either online or in person, but the United States does not. If I want to go stand on the street and instead of being Sonic, I can just hold up a pro-KKK or just a big N-word sign or whatever, I am legally free to do that, and nobody can stop me. The constitutional law only provides that the government cannot restrict or retaliate against free speech. However, private citizens can do as they see fit. This includes shouting over you, kicking out of businesses, walking out, not listening, blocking on Twitter, or firing a person that's unpopular or has said something mean. So you can have private consequences for your actions if that's what the rest of your peers think. So we can't have any government laws or government consequences for the things that we say, but we can have private ones, which is kind of interesting. But we generally believe in the United States that the government should have as little to do with public expression of opinion as possible. However, there are some important exceptions that I'm sure some of you have heard of. For example, children in school are somewhat restricted. They're there to learn and to be watched. They can't just stand up on their desk and go free speech and start talking nonsense all day. Children do not have the full rights of citizenship. So another example would be like yelling fire in a big public theater or space that would incite panic, that would cause people to trample or go crazy or do something. So inciting a public panic, bad idea. Threatening to murder somebody is not protected speech in any way. That is actually a crime, one of the few things that we can say that is a crime. And the same applies to most general criminal planning or terrorist planning. It all falls under conspiracy laws. There's slander and libel laws so that people don't just call each other pedophiles and rapists all the time and to kind of put your enemy down really quickly without consequences. If you say and post things that are untrue, that can be illegal depending on the circumstances. An expression of untrue fact is different than an opinion, mind you. There are clear definitions of what public spaces and public forums are, which are designated free speech zones, and they're different from private spaces. And finally, you cannot be, this is the most important point of all of today's video, because the rest is going to kind of flow from this. You cannot be forced to listen to somebody else's opinion, to host that opinion, or be forced to reiterate or re-say or reaffirm or publish some other person's opinion. You have the right to say literally nothing until the end of the time if you want to. But backing up one point about public and private spaces and forums, let's call in Sonic the Hedgehog to explain what a public space is.
Even if it's a very unpopular idea and something that's very silly, I am free to come out here in public, in a public space, and express it any way that I see fit. Now, it's a very important distinction because if you look down around me, this sidewalk is a public space. A sidewalk is a public space, and if I were to stand in the street over here, this would also be a public space, but it would be illegal for me to block traffic. However, a parking lot that's owned by a private business like the Democratic Party office, I could not protest on by walking over here. Now, in the United States of America, we generally have a really, in the US, we have a lot of public values around protest and freedom of expression, so most people probably wouldn't tell me to leave, but if they did, I would actually have to leave this parking lot and come back over here into the public space to continue speaking freely.
So that's the basics, but today's video is a lot more complicated because of how the internet is classified. As of right now, most legal experts would agree that the internet is not a public space. It's public as me and you would think of it, in the sense that almost anyone can see what you post and that it's not private and that what you do nobody can look at, but the space, the physical, or in this case digital space, is not publicly owned like a road or park. Roads and parks are property of the general public and can be treated as such. Internet space is not, because the internet is nothing but millions of servers from millions of companies and private individuals that are all linked together. Most of these private servers are also linked by privately owned infrastructure by ISP companies such as Comcast, Verizon, AT&T, etc. The best analogy that I can make would be kind of like if every single server was a private art gallery that were connected by 100% private roads. So the individuals that own the roads and the individuals that own the galleries have a lot of freedom to do what they want with them. As we mentioned before, a private entity or person cannot be compelled to host the speech of others. This was to prevent government requirements of affirmations for all sorts of things, and to prevent certain companies from demanding political loyalty. So, for example, if I wanted to start a new Nazi movement of some kind, and you can use whatever offends you in this. We're just going to use Nazi movement for today. Google has no legal requirement to allow me to start this movement or host it on their services. Now, Google is not the government. Google can't send the police to come arrest me and give me a spanking for saying naughty things. And in the case even of Nazism, the government can't either, for that matter. It's protected free speech. I can say and do as I see fit and express any political opinion that I can see fit. However, Google can refuse to service me as a customer. They can refuse to host my content. They can refuse to host my website or post my videos or just whatever I'm doing with the website. They can just say no. Nobody in the United States is legally required to do business with me except for the federal government. And if I'm unpopular enough, I can be entirely cut off from the internet, and that no ISP, no domain registry, no company, nobody wants to host me or deal with me, or I've been deplatformed, so to speak. And interestingly, this is the crux of the argument against net neutrality too, that if these corporations have a freedom of speech or freedom to run their businesses how they see fit, then they can't be compelled under net neutrality rules to share blames equally, but that's for a different video. But wouldn't it restrict my freedom of speech if I were completely deplatformed? If I were kicked off of YouTube and Twitter and Facebook and Gab and Twitch and everything that you can think of, wouldn't that mean that I no longer have freedom of speech, that I've been completely restricted and gagged by private companies? Well, no, not by current legal definitions. I don't entirely agree with this, but we're sticking with just regular legal definitions for now, and we're moving into opinion later. A person who has been completely deplatformed can still buy their own server. I can go out of my way to create my own website called drifterlovesnazis.com, host it on my server with whatever I want on it, probably as long as it's not child porn or, copyrighted content. And I can host that server. I could probably buy my own domain name, but domain name registry companies don't have to work with me. I could make my server only available via Tor or just direct connection or whatever, and I can host whatever I want. In that way, I still have freedom of speech. Now, it's much more difficult for people to access my server or learn about it, but I'm not restricted from posting things on my tiny little physically owned section of the internet. But how about we have Sonic the Hedgehog make a much more concrete example of this?
Hey, I need money for better CGI. Sonic has seen better days, man. This CGI is really expensive. Can you see all those teeth I had and those big uncomfortable quads? I look like somebody's DeviantArt fan art. It was really hurtful. So this type of free speech is much more complicated because right now I am on private property, more specifically Best Buy's private property, and it's kind of the crux of the idea of today's video.
Do a pose.
Do a pose? Are you on this? Probably hold it out like this. Anytime. So, Best Buy is a private corporation which has all the same rights as an individual. As an individual, you can't be compelled to speak in favor of somebody else, or you can't be compelled to reiterate things that other people say. So, if Best Buy doesn't like my message, they don't have to allow me to use their private property to spread my message. Now, in the United States, this is often forgotten because we have a very strong culture of freedom of speech, and most private businesses, including Best Buy, are very patient with this kind of thing, and they don't really care, and it's bad PR to crack down on protesters. But legally speaking, if the store management team from inside there right now were to come out and tell me, we don't like your goofy Sonic stuff here, you gotta leave, I have to leave or I can be arrested. And when I get arrested, my freedom of speech is not being violated. I'll be arrested for trespassing. And this is the perfect analogy for freedom of speech on Google, YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, and all these other private companies that run private platforms which kind of operate as private spaces on the internet, but it's complicated.
Finally, we are at the crux of today's video: deplatforming of a person because of political views. Currently, this is in no way illegal, nor does it restrict freedom of public speech. However, the definition of public space, publisher, platform, and forum are all very critical to if this is legal or not. Some people would argue that the internet should count as a public space, including the big companies that operate on it. And I don't think that this is an unreasonable opinion. There are some very good arguments for why the internet could or should be treated as a public space, and I'm going to just do 4 of them off the top of my head, and that's that most current discussions happen online more than in person. They'll happen via phone, which is probably online, or any public event that you see about, you're going to learn first on the internet, including government public service announcements that are announced through private platforms. Man, I'm struggling with my words today. Most current discussions happen online more than they do in person, so having what you would think would be a private conversation online is an expectation of the person. They happen via phone, which is also a slightly different version of online, and public events are announced online, including public government events. They'll announce it through Twitter or Facebook or on their website, which you still need private lanes to access, the ISPs. Number 2 is that having access to the internet is essential for communicating any large-scale idea. It would be so hard to start a political movement or any sort of big movement without access to the internet. And 3, most websites, at least those based in the United States, generally operate by U.S. freedom of speech rules, minus some obscenity and Nazi stuff, and some have corporate values and things that they don't like, but they try very hard to be open marketplaces of ideas and embrace freedom of speech, but it's not perfect. And 4, and this is probably most importantly, the general public thinks that they are public spaces. Most US citizens do think that the internet is a public space, and they're very confused when they're blocked, censored, banned, or whatever. They don't understand how that is not restricting their freedom of speech. Now, people generally confuse this. I've had people tell me that if I block them on Twitter or delete their YouTube comments, then I violated their constitutional rights and they're going to sue me. That's not true, and that's why you can't sue YouTube for deleting any video. But a lot of people just don't think that it should be that way. Just imagine starting a new political party and trying to make it grow without the internet. Or what if the police wrongfully arrested you? Where would you post to complain about it? What public space would you go to? You probably wouldn't stand in front of the police station about it. If you wanted to learn about an unpopular, weird, or conspiracy idea, where would you go to learn about this unpopular thing if it's not going to be in most public libraries or widely discussed? If you wanted to look for an unusual sexual partner, if you wanted somebody to express your love to, like say a Sonic Furry, what's the best place to go for that? The internet is the best place by far for all of these things. If I really wanted to start Sonic Furries for Trump 2020 and unite the furry community for some goal, there is almost no way for me to do that without the internet. The internet just amplifies any reach by thousands, millions of times, which is also why it can be dangerous for bad ideas. But, well, yeah, I'm not going to get into good versus bad ideas. You can look at any successful political movement in the last 10 years, and you will see that the internet was crucial in its success. There has not been a successful political movement that's happened without the internet. And it is definitely possible to change the laws to make the internet a public space and require freedom of speech on the internet. That is something that we can do and is constitutional, because there have been many constitutional restrictions on private corporations that do not serve the public interest. Now, corporations were originally supposed to serve the public interest instead of purely profits, and that obviously hasn't happened, but we still have that ability to restrict them when we see fit. Usually this is for pollution and stuff, and making bad products. So why not just classify the internet as a public space? We're going to get into that in just a minute, but first we're going to have Sonic explain protesting on government property, because I just didn't have a good place to fit it into this video, and we definitely need a Sonic break.
So one of the areas that freedom of speech gets more complicated is when it comes to government property. So I live in Plano, Texas, and this is the City of Plano Municipal Court right over here behind me. Now, I made very sure to stand on the sidewalk section of this and not actually on the court itself, because that could be illegal. While you can protest freely in a public space, some government areas are public spaces and some are not. Military spaces, police spaces, federal land, those are usually big no-nos. You don't want to be there. Places like courthouses, public forums, public works, or administrative buildings will vary by region by region. One of the more commonly accepted areas where you can protest freely on government property would be in a public park. Make America fast again?
You're just like,
You guys want to make America fast?
Make America fast.
Yeah. Sonic Furries for Trump 2020? That's okay, doesn't matter. I just want to be a blue hedgehog, and I want you to respect my right to be blue and fast. There's a lot of types of government property and times for said property where you cannot protest freely on it. One of the more common examples of the pieces of government property that you can protest on is a public fund. Now, it'll vary a little bit state by state and region by region, but generally speaking, a place like this is considered a public forum and a public place to stand, protest, and express your own opinion. But you can still be restricted here if your protest is violent, if the city has rented the park to some other group for a different function, or if you just get like 100,000 people to show up with no permit. That'd be really bad here. But generally speaking, I'm free to walk around this park all day and talk about Trump fans for Sonic and Make America Fast Again. You support Make America Fast Again? No? America's really slow right now. We gotta go fast. I'll get a ticket if I run 700 miles an hour. You guys catch any good Pokemon?
Yeah.
You guys want to make America fast again?
What is this about?
I'm not allowed to run at my full 700 mile an hour speed or I'll get a ticket, and I think that violates my constitutional rights, so I want to make America fast again. No? Yeah?
It still doesn't answer my question.
Well, that's what it's about. It's about being whatever and doing whatever the hell you want. Make America fast again? We're really slow overall. We could be moving much faster. It's a real opportunity missed.
Reclassifying the internet away from a private and to a public space would mean massive changes on how private companies operate. Here are just a few that I can think of off the top of my head. Number one, internet forums are currently not liable for what users post. This would change immediately, and the websites would be liable for anything that their users post. So automatic moderation, copyright detection, all of that would have to be much better, or the company would just have to spend a lot of money on legal fees. Number two, you would probably have to verify user citizenship before posting to ensure that they are US citizens that do enjoy the fullness of the freedom of speech and not just trolls from other countries. This would be the end of anonymity on the internet, which would not be a good thing. The website, such as YouTube for example, would be required to host almost everything. We're talking porn, we're talking Nazi stuff, we're talking pictures of dead children, child abuse, anti-LGBT, anti-conservative, anti-dog or cat, anti-anything content, anti-religious, every political idea, every conspiracy, every quack science, every single crazy off-the-wall idea that you can think of, from flat earth to hollow earth, would have to be legally required to be hosted on the website. They couldn't say no to hardly anything unless it was like child porn or a crime or just a video that somebody didn't have the rights to. Deleting a comment reply, removing a post, or almost any moderation action against not only the original poster but people literally down there in the comments with their curious opinions could be viewed as a potential violation of freedom of speech and thus open the website up to a lawsuit. So imagine if YouTube got sued every time they auto-deleted a comment. Blocking people on Twitter may no longer be legal. You may have to just get all these crazy messages on your phone and not be free from that level of harassment. And finally, it also allows for more government oversight into how these companies operate, which was another big argument against net neutrality, is that you would be giving the government more authority to step in and manage tech companies, whereas they want to be more free to run their businesses how they see fit. This would obviously erode profits, drive away advertisers, and restrict their business practices. So the issue today is not as cut and dry as media outlets would like you to believe. Our media outlets in the United States are getting increasingly more biased, so you see people on both sides saying very inaccurate things. And I think that both sides have good arguments in that the internet isn't a public space, but some people think it is, and it's not regulated as if it is a public space, but they're not required to regulate it as a public space. So because of this back and forth, I think that the US is coming to a critical decision on how we regulate the internet, And at some point in the next 10 years, we as a nation will have to pick a side on this debate. We have to decide if the internet is going to be a public space or private space, and how private and public spaces interact when it comes to freedom of speech. And we want to make this decision because we don't want mega corporations like Google, Apple, and Twitter making those decisions for us. And on this same topic, let's finally talk about conservative media restriction and censorship on the major platforms. The reason, and this is purely my opinion, that conservative media is more likely to be discriminated against on social media is twofold, and it's not the twofold that you think. There are a lot of very far-right ideas and conspiracy-type people that think that Google and Hillary Clinton meet at the base of a hollowed-out volcano, and one paid the other so many millions of dollars so that they can kill the true righteous conservative freedom fighters of the world and then kind of carve it up like megavillains. Real life doesn't work that way. The answers are much more simple. Number one, advertisers do not want to advertise on offensive content such as anti-LGBT or wall building or pro-religious stuff. Like 95% of the money to be made online is in advertising. Advertising is online. You can't pull those two apart. So when advertisers don't want to put ads on anti-gay stuff, that's a lot of revenue lost. And I'm well aware that in some circles it is very popular to be anti-LGBT or pro-wall or conservative or whatever that is very popular in some areas, and there are specialty ads that appeal to those people. But by and large, in the United States, those things are not popular. Conservative viewers out there, instead of getting mad at me, I just want you to accept the fact that anti-gay stuff is not popular right now. It is very unpopular in the same way that I just gotta suck it up and just say that Trump is incredibly popular. As much as I don't like him, reality is he's popular, and I just have to deal with that. Same kind of thing with the anti-LGBT stuff. The values are just moving one way. Advertisers do not want to be boycotted. They don't want their products not bought. They don't want their products destroyed. They don't want bad marketing, and they don't want to waste money on marketing that's just going to blow up in their face. So they also have to be very picky, and they won't advertise on people or associated ideas that are close to any of these big no-no categories. So if you are mostly one thing and a little bit of the other, that little bit enough is just to completely blacklist you. We're not going to advertise you on all. We're going to pull out. And that's where a lot of the demonetization comes out. When it comes to terms of service and policy and why these people get targeted more than others, I think it has to do with the fact that the terms of service is written to be more in favor of left-leaning ideas, because the majority of tech companies are based out of left-leaning states. California, Seattle, places like that. These are not hardcore right-wing states, and these people do believe in freedom of speech. Probably more the European one, freedom of speech, freedom of offensive things. A corporation really is just the sum of its employees. A corporation can never be more than the people that work for it because they ultimately have to make all the decisions. So demographically speaking, if you pull 1,000 employees out of, say, Seattle, they're going to be more liberal on average than pulling 1,000 employees out of Alabama. So when it comes down for the company to sit down and write up their official terms of service and create a site-wide value system and get their lawyers to look at it, every step along this way is going to be at least a little bit left-leaning. So the whole website, especially their terms, are going to be more left-leaning than right. And most companies, I do believe, put forth good effort to remain impartial because they have to do business in all states and appeal to as many people as possible, but it's 100% impossible to be 100% fair. There's no way to remove all bias from anything. As much as I try to be impartial and fair and educational in these kind of videos, it's not possible for me to remove 100% of my bias. So in this instance, the terms, especially in the case of Mr. Crowder and his banning of saying anti-LGBT things, are going to be written by pro-LGBT people. And that's just the reality that we have to deal with. Nearing the end of the video now, the corporate aspect of this debate is scarier for me than anything else. Companies are increasingly investing in machine learning, in AI moderation projects, in massive data analysis, in predictive behavior, and a lot of different crazy stuff. And these go hand in hand with opinion influencing, using users as guinea pigs to see how they react to different things, and large-scale filtering projects, mostly in the experimental stage. If our national values change, or if the owners of these companies change, then they will have the power to do really crazy stuff. They could suppress or grow just about any opinion at a scale that most people truly cannot even begin to comprehend. Even I, as sit on my little intellectual smarty pants seat over here on the internet, probably don't know the real scale of opinion influencing that could happen, which is a dangerous thing. And that's why I think that we, as a people in the United States, need to make a decision sooner rather than later about how to treat the internet. Is the internet a private space or a public one? Both have drawbacks and benefits, and you, upcoming voters of the future, are going to need to know what to do. And I hope that you learned something useful from this video that helps you make that decision later on in life. If you enjoyed this kind of content, don't forget to like, favorite, and subscribe. Drifter out. Excuse me, I got a question for you. Can you tell me where the gold rings are? I'm looking for like really
all
big...
the healthy section through here if you can granola bars and things.
Yeah, what about gold rings? They usually come in like little trails.
No, I think I'm good.
It's a sad day for Sonic. Normally I eat Cheerios for breakfast because I like golden rings. But as you can see, Sonic's gaining a little bit of extra pudge, so I had to downgrade to Kashi Heart to Heart organic gluten-free health flakes that have significantly less sugar. As a 35-year-old game character, it's hard to keep your body in shape, and I don't think I'm aging as good as I could be. No matter how fast I run, I can't outrun the pain.